The year was 2012, 8 years after my initial run-in with the infamous Moth Boy. After having almost been set on fire, I was eager to start a new chapter in my life. I went to therapy, I made advancements in my career, and I got married to a wonderful woman. We had our reception on a cruise. I know, unusual, but we've always had a thing for the ocean. We met on a diving course. I was living the married life, trying to get adjusted to the schedule of our 1-year-old daughter, when I got a call about a peculiar case. 3 men had died in the custody of the state. Prisoners. Now, prisoners get killed every day. That's a reality that most of us have sadly come to expect, but these 3 prisoners had died under unusual circumstances, and it all tied back to one recent change in order. The deaths started a couple of months prior, when Moth Boy was transferred to the prison. Of course, they didn't mention him as Moth Boy in the paperwork, but his name stood out like a scar on the page. Herman had been stuck in the system so long that he'd turned 18, and now he was a proper prisoner. In a real jail, alongside murderers, robbers, and God knows what else. I considered applying for reassignment, but I was specifically requested by name. They figured my experience with him might give a more balanced view of what was going on. Besides, there was another investigator working another angle. Let's just call her Mrs. Short. She was under the strict opinion that this was a matter of failed rehabilitation, and that the state was responsible for Moth Boy's behaviour, arguing that he'd just been a child when he was shuffled back into the dark corners of the juvenile detention system. That's what settled this for me. Not that I wanted answers, but that there was someone who wanted to put Moth Boy anywhere but in a maximum security prison. She wanted him in a mental hospital, and to receive care. I wasn't buying it. I'd seen that dead-eyed kid cover me with a bottle of lighter fluid, ready to burn me like a witch. I wasn't sure of much at that time and point in my career, but I knew for a fact that there was nothing good in that shell of a person. And if I had to argue my point, I was ready to do so. I set out on a Monday morning. I kept getting updates from my wife. Our daughter was a bit under the weather, and we were waiting for the pediatrician to get back to us. There was always something. Was she looking a little pale after eating that spoon of peanut butter? Was she breathing a little differently when she lay on this side as opposed to that side? I was always in this state of what-if flavoured worry. I arrived to meet Mrs. Short at the jail. A stern-looking woman in her early 40s with an evil stepmother kind of look. Not the kind of woman you'd expect to be arguing for nurture and care. We shook hands and introduced ourselves. She didn't seem all that pleased. "I'm sorry that they dragged you out here," she said. "I suspect this will be a fairly conclusive investigation." "How so?" I asked. "The warden isn't particularly well enthused about prisoner rehabilitation," she said. "Now, I know that isn't your priority either, however." "Excuse me?" We looked at one another for a moment as I blinked away 6 questions. I shook my head, clutching my hand in my pocket. "I've been working on rehab programs for close to 6 years," I clarified. "Youth rehabilitation, juvenile detention and development. A program I designed is used in 38 different locations. So I do care about rehabilitation. I care very much. Except, of course, for this particular case." "Yes, Mrs. Short," I said. "Yes. I think a 10-year-old who strangles and burns their babysitter is ill-equipped to return to society. He's not 10 years old anymore. That just makes him more dangerous." She accompanied me, reluctantly. We checked in our personal items at the front desk. Pretty much everything, but our shoes went into a box with a faded blue sunflower logo. I signed the sign-in sheet, and continued down the hall to a small office space we were supposed to share. Bare concrete floors, lined with white brick walls, the smell of chlorine and cheap soap, raised voices in the distance. It was impossible to tell if they were happy or angry, but I could make an educated guess. Mrs. Short and I stepped into the office. It looked like a refurbished interrogation room, and the lack of air conditioning confirmed it. Small barred windows overlooking a sniper tower, a single desk with 2 opposing chairs. Mrs. Short had already set up a laptop, and there were a couple of folders spread out. There was a TV in the corner, hooked up to show surveillance footage. "We don't know if he's responsible for all 3 deaths," she explained, showing me a folder. "There are signs, but there is no definite proof, no witnesses." I flipped through the folder, raising an eyebrow. One of the men had been found with a spongy moth caterpillar stuffed in his mouth. "You think the caterpillars showed up on their own?" I asked. "I'm just saying there is a presumption of innocence," she smiled. "We ought not to draw conclusions." Another man had been found with several caterpillars in his mouth. The last victim had been riddled with them. Then there was Moth Boy's file, Herman. He was just 18 years old, but had grown to a staggering 6 feet 8 inches. He still didn't speak a word, but had caused plenty of trouble over the years. Assault mostly, a couple of thefts, one attempted escape. He had the same dead eyes, and there was a strange musculature to him. He had these intense neck muscles that made it look like an old Batman costume. "His calling card in every death," I said. "Asphyxiation, asphyxiation, asphyxiation." "Strangulation, to be specific," Mrs. Short corrected. "Yes, they were murdered, but there is no definite proof of his involvement. The caterpillars are pretty much everywhere. Check the wall linings, you'll find some." "Was it always like that? Are you blaming an insect infestation on a single inmate?" "Yes," I said. "This can't be a coincidence." "Again, no proof," she said. "But yes, their arrival coincides with his." I was left to my own devices for most of the day. I juggled responding to text messages with checking surveillance footage. Moth Boy was huge. He'd grown out this shoulder-length hair that looked like he'd showered in olive oil. There were a couple of tapes showing confrontations between him and other inmates, and I figured that was a good place to start. Mrs. Short interviewed a couple of guards in the meantime. Moth Boy seemed to always be the target of something. Someone wanting to show that they're big and tough. Someone pushing him, or trying to cut in line. And every single time, it devolved into absolute chaos. Perhaps he was, or wasn't, responsible for 3 murders. But there were over 26 incident reports of violent behaviour in the past 8 months. He spent almost half his time in isolation, but it didn't seem to deter him. There was this one video of a man walking up to Moth Boy when he was playing checkers with another inmate. The man flipped the board. Moth Boy stood up, showed his hand in the man's mouth, and proceeded to try and pull his tongue out. It took 4 guards to subdue him, and the man was sent to the infirmary with a bruised tongue and a broken jaw. There were similar cases. Someone trying to snatch his dessert only to get a fork shoved through his eardrum. Moth Boy had taken a couple of hits every now and then too. 3 stabbings, 2 broken fingers, 1 blow to the head that may have caused a concussion. Problem was, he never sought help. He would hide it until someone else reported it. By the end of the day, Mrs. Short came back with a stack of papers. She sat down across from me, organising a stack of papers into a new folder. You could say a lot about her, but she wasn't sloppy. "You see it yet?" she asked. "See what?" She rolled her eyes, but kept an honest smile. She pointed at one of the tapes, the one where he tried to pull a man's tongue out. "This one," she said. "You see it?" "Violent, yeah." "No," she said. "The checkers game. He was playing with someone, socializing." "I'm not buying it," I said, shaking my head. "Not one bit." "Then perhaps I ought to book you an interview with Mr. Doan tomorrow." I wasn't afraid to have my view challenged. From where I was standing, I saw a violent criminal protected by technicalities. If I wasn't ready to have my opinion challenged, it was worthless. So I agreed to see this mysterious Mr. Doan. Coming home that night, my daughter was fine. No fever, no anything. I took first watch that night, relieving my wife who'd been with her all day. There was little to no fussing, but I couldn't help but to think back on that 10-year-old boy, the silent little Herman, who wrote messages with crayons, the weird kid who'd been found walking along the highway. Are people like that born or created? Rocking my baby girl, I didn't know what answer I wanted. But if someone could be born evil, who was to say my girl wasn't? But if someone could be made evil, then that would mean they could be unmade, like Mrs. Short was suggesting. I didn't like it. I watched my daughter. Her eyes still had life in them. Joy, sadness, something. And I held her tight that night, hoping those eyes would never fade to a dead-eye stare, that she would never have to see moths as anything but creepy butterflies. I met with Mr. Doan the next day, a man in his early 70s. He was sentenced to life for the double homicide of his brother and wife. He'd been in jail for close to 40 years, and his life had slowed to a crawl. He was calm, collected, well-spoken, and had long since accepted his role. He was respected among the staff, helped out all the newbies, and was the one person none of the gangs looked twice at. And apparently, he was Moth Boy's friend. Doan sat across from me in the interrogation room. No chains or anything, there was no need. He was well-shaved and had a walnut tint to his dark eyes. There was an inherent sadness to his face, like his smile was being pulled into the ground. I introduced myself. We shook hands. I asked him about Herman. "They all call him Moth Boy," he said. "All of them, even the guards." "Do you call him that?" I asked. "I don't call him much of anything," Doan smiled. "I just wave him over. We play games, trade books, that sort of thing." "So you haven't been in a confrontation with him? No squabble, no pushing, nothing?" "No, nothing like that," he continued. "The guy's a gentle giant if you get to know him. Always shares his snacks. Did you know he loves music boxes?" "He does?" Yeah, Doan continued. "I got one playing that, Elvis song. Can't Help Falling in Love. It's his favourite. You got any idea why?" Doan looked at me with a shrug and shook his head. His eyes drifted away for a moment as he crossed his arms. I think he just likes to spin the little crank. Or maybe it sounds funny. He's not a complicated guy. And he's not violent. Not to you. "Never," Doan reiterated. "Trust him with my life." Mrs. Short shared a couple of interviews with me. She'd transcribed them meticulously. It painted a broad picture of Moth Boy and his time in prison. The people she'd talked to spoke about him as an instigator, as if he loved to provoke. He'd slip maggots into people's food or stare at them from across the yard. He would never take the first step, but he would look for buttons to press. Anything to give him an excuse to defend himself in the most horrible way. But for some reason, this Doan guy flew completely under the radar. It had been months, and this was the only person not on Moth Boy's radar. It'd be one thing if it was a serial killer, some kind of kindred spirit. but Doan was just a nice old man with a violent past. Doesn't add up, I admitted. I don't know what to make of this. Then maybe that's something to consider, Mrs. Short added. I'm not saying he should walk free, but I'm saying maybe there's something that can be fixed. I wasn't convinced, but I couldn't refuse what I was seeing. There was something I was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I talked to my wife about it, in broad strokes. She was microwaving a burrito and cooling her head with a bag of frozen peas while I fed the kid. Some people just have that one person they stick to, she said. Like how captive tigers can be raised with golden retrievers. People aren't like that, I said. I mean, this kid, I shook my head, imagining that grainy footage of him shoving his hand into a man's mouth. There'd been no sound, but my mind filled in the blanks. I shuddered. He's not normal, I continued. People can do bad and sick things, but still be people. But I don't know about this one. Maybe you gotta look a little closer, she said, shoveling half a burrito into her mouth. Hungry hippo vibes aside, she made a good point. When I put my girl to bed that night, I thought about Moth Boy again. His parents must have put him to bed at some point. Had they known back then what he would become? Was that why he was abandoned? And if push came to shove, could I do the same? Looking at my daughter, I knew I couldn't. No matter how dead those eyes turned, I couldn't look away. But something must have happened for him to be left like that. Or could he have killed them? He'd done it before. I put my girl down and backed out, only to hear her fuss and groan. I came back to check on her, seeing her wipe her tired little face with the full palm of her round hand, and a little maggot smeared across her face. Moths. I washed her off and changed every piece of fabric in her crib. I changed my clothes too, finding a handful more maggots. Spongy moth larvae, not old enough to be caterpillars yet. I was furious. If I'd ever considered his innocence, or an effort for rehabilitation, it went out the window in that moment. I didn't care. God, he was disgusting, and it just seeped into every life he touched. 2 days later, Mrs. Short and I were stopped at the door of the prison. There'd been a fourth victim, and an investigation was in full swing. This time, there was surveillance footage. We got to watch it while they put Moth Boy back into isolation, and we were not to enter the main prison floor. The footage was grainy, but just the right angle. It had happened right outside the showers. A man was walking back, meeting Moth Boy as they crossed paths. Suddenly, out of nowhere, they started fighting. Moth Boy threw the first punch. The man took a blow to the side of the head, wobbled, and collapsed. Herman picked his head up, held it close against the wall, and kneed it. I'd never seen a head turn that shape before. The man was dead before his body could figure out what was going on. I could see blood pooling on the floor as Moth Boy wrote something on the wall. Very happy. Before the guards could pry him away, he stuffed something into the man's mouth. I didn't have to look close to see what it was. I knew. We all knew. It had only been hours, less than a day. But I knew that message meant something. I've seen that before, I said. He wrote it to me once. When? Mrs. Short asked. Why? Long ago. Not a lot of things make him happy, I said, pointing at the screen. Except that. Blood? Killing? I'm not sure, I said. Both. Neither. An uncomfortable thought crossed my mind. I turned to her, trying to find the right words. Does he know I'm here? I asked. Does he know about us? About our investigation? I think so, yeah, she said. I looked back at the screen as it flickered. Perhaps it was no accident that he chose those particular words. Perhaps he had something to say. Was he putting on a show? I talked to the warden. He wasn't enthused by my idea, but there was no better time to do this. An interview. Moth Boy was in solitary, chained to a bed. It was as secure as can be. The warden didn't think there'd be much to gain from an interview, but he humoured me. He'd been the one who called me there to begin with, after all. I was escorted through the prison. I could hear raised voices, and this time they were definitely angry. Some people had lost a friend, others a brother in arms. It was a matter of gang loyalty and demands for retribution. Moth Boy was in the crosshairs. Perhaps that's what he wanted. Targets. The more the merrier. More people for him to kill in self-defense. But chances were that he might be transferred to a different prison. This had crossed a line. Previous attempts had at least been subtle. I was taken to the solitary ward. It didn't look that different, except it had a green stripe across the walls. It was just 4 rooms, no windows, just beds, a toilet, and a sink to wash your hands. Well kept, but equally well used. The guard showed me a room in the far corner. He checked a slot in the door, slid the key in the lock, and clicked it open. He does anything he shouldn't. Get out. Don't take risks with this one, he said. We clear? I nodded. Herman, the Moth Boy. He was laying flat on a pillowless bed, chained and bound. They'd barely washed the blood off him. You could still see it on his legs. Even lying down, he was a giant. He looked my way, his eyes as dead and disinterested as ever. I sat down on the floor across from him as the door shut. He turned his head my way, not saying a word. 8 years later, and I could still see him as a little boy. If you didn't know him, you could mistake him for a man in his 30s. Life hadn't been kind to him. Hello, Herman, I said. It's been a while. He tapped his finger against the cuffs, twice. Tap, tap. A yes. Do you remember me? Tap, tap. Yes. It was an unnecessary question. I could tell he remembered. It was like looking at a dog who'd bit you. It knew what I tasted like. I tried asking a couple of control questions. Yes. He remembered the Wheeler foster home, where we'd met. He remembered the other children. And yes, he remembered Vicky, who he'd strangled and burned in a classmate's drained pool. And here he was, almost a decade later, still killing, just like I'd known he would. Did you kill this man for fun? I asked. One tap. Number that surprised me. Was he a threat to you? Number, did someone ask you to? No answer. His hand hovered over the cuff, uncertain. Finally, he tapped once. You wrote that you were very happy, I said. Did the killing make you happy? One tap. Was it me? I asked. Was it a message for me? And with that, a flicker of something in his eyes, like an old motor rumbling to life. 2 taps. Yes. Before I could ask him about it, I heard a commotion outside. The raised voices had grown louder. Someone was breaking something. The guard outside my door looked in, yelled something in a hurry and rushed off, leaving me locked in a room with the Moth Boy. It must have been serious. I got up to see what was going on, but the door was locked, and no one was coming to open. I couldn't see anything, just hear the angry voices in the distance. I looked back at Herman. His head was still turned my way. Is this you? I asked. Did you do something? 2 taps. He sat up as far as the constraints allowed, leaning a little against the wall. He was big, but he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Then he started to twist a little. Not contort or bend, just shimmy. And with his hands behind his back, I heard a strange noise. A light, metallic ping. The first tunes of a music box playing Can't Help Falling in Love. I banged on the door, hoping someone would open. The music played. Seconds later, it stopped with a clang. It was broken apart, and something clicked. The chains fell from Herman's hands. He'd taken a particular piece of Dohan's music box, one shaped in a way that could be used as a lockpick. He didn't hesitate to sit up and start working on the next lock, and the next. All the while, he looked at me, silently asking me if I was going to do something about it. I didn't have my service weapon. No one was opening the door, and by the time the last shackles fell from his feet, an alarm went off in the hallway. Something was happening outside, but the real crisis was happening in front of me. What was I supposed to do? Before long, he was free. He and I locked in a room, and he was holding a sharp piece of metal. "You want to hurt me?" I asked. "Is that it?" This time he snapped his fingers. 2 snaps. "Yes." "You're gonna kill me?" I held my breath. He didn't respond. Instead, he flicked away the little music box crank like the tail end of a cigarette. "You're gonna kill me, aren't you?" He shrugged at me and snapped his finger once, but he held his hand up to my face, his thumb ready for another snap. He could turn that no into a yes, but he didn't. He tried to push me, but I was faster. He followed up, swinging his arms out wide to grab me. I couldn't get away. He swept me up, turned me around, and threw me to the floor. Before I had a chance to react, I felt something tugging on my leg. He was taking my shoes. He untied my shoelaces and pulled them out, leaving my shoes on the floor. He twined them together into a makeshift rope and spun them around his hands. Something to strangle with, like he'd done as a kid. For a moment he just stood there, looking down at me. It was the same as all those years ago. Those dead eyes. He'd just killed a man. He wouldn't have any problems with killing another. He towered over me. I froze. Every option in my head was a dead end. It all came back to him. Maybe he regretted not killing me all those years ago. If he had, maybe he wouldn't be here. Maybe he was making up for lost time. There was something missing in him. This wasn't just a damaged kid who'd taken a wrong turn. There was something gone in those eyes. Something just as real as missing a hand or a foot. Something like a soul. He grabbed me. I tried to get out of his grip, but I couldn't. His fingers were like vices. I don't remember what I said. I swore and spat, writhing like an angry cat refusing a bath. But it was pointless. We were worlds apart. He could snap my neck without even trying. But he didn't. He didn't do anything. He just moved me out of the way, putting me on the bed. Then he turned his back on me, looking at the door. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It didn't make sense. "What are you doing?" I asked. "What is this?" No answer. "Are you escaping? Am I a hostage?" He looked back at me and shrugged. He brought his thumb up to his mouth, and with his back turned, I heard a pop. Then, with a bloodied thumb, he drew a smiley face on the wall, same as he'd drawn with a crayon once. The angry voices had gathered outside the door by now. I could barely hear anything over the alarm, but I could make out the metallic rattling of keys. They were trying to get the door open. But when the door finally clicked, it wasn't guards on the other side. It was Inmates. They thought he was unarmed. They saw the chains left on the floor, but they didn't see the shoelaces. Perhaps that's what gave them the courage to attack. When the first man swung at him, Moth Boy swept his neck up, spun him around, and kicked the door shut. He fell flat backwards, laying on the ground on his back with the other inmate on top of him. He used the bolted-down bed as a brace, pushing out his legs to put his whole weight into holding the door closed a little longer. He strangled a man to death in front of me. I heard the cartilage break and saw the muscles go limp. It was fast, almost clinical. Moth Boy didn't skip a beat, and now he had a shiv. He turned to me, and with a quick flick of the wrist, he stabbed me. I didn't even realize it until I saw the blood. It wasn't deep, but it hurt like a gunshot. A cut straight into the side of my rib. A surface-level cut, about 2 inches long. Then he turned his back on me like nothing had happened. The door burst in as angry inmates flooded the cell. One of them got the shiv straight to the jugular. They had these sharpened toothbrushes and razor blades, whatever they could get their hands on. One of them had some kind of flaying knife made from bottle caps. But the room was too small for them all to come at once, and one-on-one, they didn't stand a chance. Moth Boy didn't care about the occasional cut. He didn't even flinch. 3 men dropped dead to the floor, and by the time the others realized what was going on, it was too late. He followed them into the hall, leaving the door wide open. He'd wanted to hurt me, just like he said. But I'd clearly missed something. I shuffled into the hallway, stepping over bodies. Some of them were still moving, their nerves shutting down with every missed breath. I watched as one man lagged behind the others. Moth Boy got to him, and that would be the end of it. One strike to break a jaw, another to crack a neck. I held my wound shut, feeling the warmth pool out of me. And before he rounded a corner in the opposite direction, he looked back at me, a hand raised in a casual goodbye as his dead eyes turned to new horizons. The guards found me not long after, shoeless and bleeding. The whole ordeal had almost blown into a full prison riot. Apparently they'd found old Doan's body in the pantry with his neck cut. This, in combination with the previous death, had caused some sort of dispute. It had escalated to a pseudo-riot. I was stitched up and sent for debriefing. I had a long talk with the warden, but I was just waiting for Mrs. Short to show her face again. I knew she'd have something to say. She met me in the nurse's office before I was sent off to the hospital for a proper checkup. For the first time since I'd met her, she seemed a bit frazzled. "He killed him," I said. "Killed the old man just to get the music box. And with that, he got out of his chains." "To do what?" she asked. "Protect you from rioters?" "Protect? No," I spat. "He stabbed me. We have witnesses seeing a man storm the room with that particular shiv," she continued. "You saying Herman did this? Just to stab you once and then stop?" "Yes, that's exactly it." And that's when I understood. Moth Boy had not just done this to mess with me. He'd done this to craft a narrative. That's all it was. It was one long story. He'd started killing months ago to show people what it looked like. Caterpillars showed into mouths. Everyone knew it was him. It was unspoken, but clear as day. Then he'd killed Doan, but without leaving his calling card. No caterpillars. That would make the whole block riot as they accused one another of killing the beloved regular. Some would blame Moth Boy, others would blame each other. Having killed 4 men, and always stuffing their mouths full of caterpillars, Moth Boy's calling card was obvious. He'd established it from day one. And those who suspected him would try to get to him as the rest of the cell block erupted into chaos. He'd taken the music box, possible even before he killed the man on the camera. Doan had been tucked away at the far end of the pantry, so people wouldn't notice him until the chefs showed up for dinner service, which was right around the time I stepped in for the interview. The guards had thrown Moth Boy into isolation without noticing the music box. It was small enough to fit into the palm of his hand. Breaking off the little crank, he could pick the lock off his shackles. He took my shoelaces to protect himself with a familiar weapon, but I can't imagine that's the only reason he wanted me there. And then he'd stabbed me, just a little. And now, as I looked at Mrs. Short, I could see why he did it. He'd made it look like I'd been attacked by another inmate, and he'd been the one to step in, like a guardian. And how good it looked. A gentle giant desperately breaking out of his chains to stand up for an old friend. "He was protecting you," she said. "I'm sure of it." "He didn't," I said. "He's using you. He's planning it. I've made my decision," she continued. "You're here in an advisory capacity, and I thank you for your time. You don't understand. He's the fucking devil. He was just playing with us. It was a playground, and now she was going to put him into recovery, within arm's reach of vulnerable people. She was going to put the most sadistic, manipulative thing I'd ever met into a program where he could get away with anything. And the more I protested, the more her mind was made up. It was already settled. "Please don't do this," I begged. "Please don't do this." "I'm sorry," she said. "You're too close to this. It's done." It was chaos out there. Screaming. Slamming doors. If I closed my eyes, I could smell the blood, and I didn't know if it was coming from me or the hallway. I'd later find out that, in total, 9 people died that day. My wife would see me at the hospital. I'd be okay. The wound looked bad, and it'd leave a nasty scar, but it wasn't going to take any years off my life. But as I held my wife and felt the thumping of blood press against my stitches, I couldn't help but think of what was about to happen. Mrs. Short was going to put Herman, the Moth Boy, into some sort of recovery program. He would lie and cheat and plot. He would use every tool at his disposal, and he would get her to do what he wanted. He didn't care how long it took, or how many people had to die. He just wanted to play his little games, and people would have to suffer for it. And maybe, at the end of the day, that was the point. Maybe he just wanted the suffering. That night as I put my daughter to bed, I kept thinking about his dead, soulless eyes. I could feel something cold creeping up my spine as I imagined my baby girl looking up at me with that same expression, silently asking me if I'd still love her if she was a monster. And I have to be honest, at that point, I didn't know if I could. Maybe I too would have left my child along the highway and disappeared. But she didn't look at me like that. She smiled, cooling my soul like a healing balm. I couldn't accept a world where someone like her could become someone like him. I just couldn't. Some monsters have to be born. Hi everyone, thanks for listening. That was Moth Boy, Part 2, written by Reddit's own Saturdead. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. Stick around, because tomorrow night is Part 3, the finale. I'll be dropping it around 8 PM, GMT. I never know when the right time would be to drop these videos. I have subscribers in the UK and the USA, as well as a few places in between. If you have a preferred time, please let me know in the comments, and hopefully I can sort out a happy medium. If you'd like to support what I do, or just want to see how many coffees it takes before my words start to vibrate, My PayPal link is in the description. This channel isn't monetized, so any donation really helps. And now, a fun fact you didn't ask for, but apparently I did. Remember in part 1 when I admitted I'm scared of butterflies? Yeah. I failed to mention that when I was 20, I got drunk and ended up with a tattoo that has butterflies in the design. So now, every time I step out of the shower and catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I jump. Because apparently I'm both the victim and the monster in my own personal horror story. Good night.